This is Bill Markley. I'm of the Records and Archives Department of Licking County, and I'm talking today with Judge Gregory Frost of the U.S. District Court, Southern District of Ohio. And it's April 9th, 2014. And thank you, Judge Frost, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill.
Sure. We're going to start out with some just very basic introductory questions.
All right.
Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Newark, Ohio, north end of Newark. In fact, I went to school in the Newark school system, but we were the furthest street north in the school district. It was North Vernon Avenue, which is off of Mount Vernon Road, way out, probably halfway to St. Louisville, or to Banana. I grew up there with my twin brother and my other brother and my sister. Yeah.
I had twin sisters. So
oh, did you? Okay.
I know how tough.
Yeah.
Twins. No, not really, but anyway. So you went to Newark Public Schools?
I went to Newark Public Schools, North Elementary for elementary school, Roosevelt for junior high school, and then Newark High School. Graduated from Newark High School in 1967.
Okay. How did you first get interested in the law?
Well, that's probably a good question. I didn't really get interested in the practice or thinking about the practice of law until I was in undergraduate school. I went to Wittenberg University in Springfield, Ohio. And during that period of time, 67 to 71, of course, the Vietnam War was going on. And everybody in college was trying to find a way out of being drafted. But that started me thinking about what am I going to do when I get out of college. I had no relatives or anything like that who had been in the practice of law. For some reason I just thought, well, that might be so. I majored in political science, and that kind of helped a little bit, my major at Wittenberg. And that just started me thinking about the law, and next thing I know, I thought, well, maybe I'll apply to a couple law schools. If I get in, fine. If I don't, fine. And that's how it started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were there any political philosophers or authors in political science that you found especially interesting at that time or later?
Yeah, and that's funny you should say that. There were a couple essays. They weren't treatises or books. They were just a couple essays that I had read while I was in undergraduate school that had to do with the law. And to be honest with you, I don't even know who the authors are right now. But I remember I was kind of taken back by the fact, oh, yeah, I understand now what they're getting at as far as the law, and maybe a little bit of what's behind the law. That is it's just not representing people, or it's just not trying to get your cases through the court. It's more a job of trying to do the right thing and do justice. And I still remember those treatises thinking, oh, yeah, this isn't just getting clients and getting a case. This is really trying to do something good. Yeah.
Interesting.
Right.
Good. And you went to Ohio Northern for law school?
Yeah, after I got out of Wittenberg, I went to Ohio Northern University Law School up in Ada, Ohio. That was from 71 to 74. It was a good experience for me. I will have to tell you, Ada, Ohio is nowhere to be in the winter, but it was good from one standpoint. There weren't a whole lot of social activities to engage yourself in, which was good for me because it made me study harder. I was able to graduate from law school then.
And you were involved in the Ohio Northern Law Review, is that right?
I was lucky in that regard. I was selected to be on the law review up at Ohio Northern. And if you're going to law school now, you have to be in the top 1 or 2% of your class, and my grades were pretty good. But the funny thing at Ohio Northern was the law review had gone out of existence. No one wanted to really put that much time and work into it. And a good friend of mine, Joe Banks, at Ohio Northern, I was sitting around studying in the library one day, and he came up and says, "We're going to try to resurrect the law review. Do you want to be on the law review?" And I said, "Well, I don't know much about it, but yeah, I'll volunteer if you want me to." Well, it turned out that was the easiest way to get on a law review of any school in the world. And so we actually created the very first edition, and it's still going now. In fact, the logo for the law review is a picture of the phoenix rising from the ashes, because we didn't have it before, we had it before. It had gone into non-existence, and then we were able to resurrect it. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What all did that involve? Your activity?
A lot of work. It was a lot of work. Had I known how much work it was going to be, I don't know that I would have done it. But it involved a lot of research and writing, a ton of research and writing. And because we had a small staff just getting started, it was probably more than they have to do now. Basically, we would do Supreme Court reviews, review every Supreme Court decision, and do a case study of that in the book, in the law review book. And then we would reach out to professors and have them submit articles, and of course we'd have to edit those, and then we'd have to write our own articles. Everybody would be assigned a topic that generally that they were interested in, and have to write a law review article of some sort. So, yeah, that's what it was all about. And it was a lot of work, but as I look back on it now, I'm kind of happy I had that opportunity. Yeah.
When you were at Ohio Northern, did you think a lot about going into the field of say, either prosecuting in general or county prosecutor position, or did that come later?
Well, no. The history on that is that while I was in law school, I got married to a lady by the name of Kathy Schaller. Her father was a practicing attorney here in Newark, Ohio, Jim Schaller. And her brother was going through law school at that time, Steve Schaller. Jim Schaller was associated with Neil Laughlin, who was the county prosecutor at the time. And so in the summers, in between, I guess it was my second and third year, the prosecutor's office hired me as a, quote, investigator. It doesn't have the pizzazz you might think it does. An investigator for the prosecutor's office back then was assigned to go around and check zoning issues, junkyards, and things like that.
Not quite like Mannix or...
Right,
okay.
to make sure that they were in compliance. So I did that for a year, and then assisted, or for a summer, and assisted in putting together criminal cases for prosecution and so forth. And I found I really enjoyed it. So then my third year, I graduated from law school, took the bar exam, the Ohio bar exam. I was fortunate enough to pass that, and I was hired immediately. It was a nice thing because, first of all, I knew everybody in the office, and second of all, I had a little bit of a background. So after law school, and after the bar exam, I went right into the prosecutor's office. I guess I worked for the prosecutor's office during that summer while I was studying for the bar exam also. Then that fall, the grades came out, I passed, and I was hired, and took over immediately as a assistant county prosecutor, handling mostly juvenile work in the juvenile court.
That was one question.
Yeah, and then also being assigned to do, because I had a background in legal writing from the bar review, or from the law review. They also had me doing a lot of the Court of Appeals work, writing briefs for the Court of Appeals and things like that. And it was a Neil Laughlin was the prosecutor, and he was, he had a good way of working people into the prosecutor's job, prosecutorial job. And that is, you'd start in a juvenile court where you couldn't do much damage, and then you would work up into the felony division and start handling felony cases. In the same time, you were doing Court of Appeals briefs and stuff like that, handling the civil work for the prosecutor's office. I was assigned a lot of that too, representing school boards in the county, representing township trustees in the county, and so forth. So I got to know everybody in the county right away, and then finally worked into the felony division and started doing felony criminal work.
Okay.
But back then, which is different than it is today, it was a part-time job. The county prosecutor was a part-time job, as well as all the assistant county prosecutors. So we could have a private practice as well as do the county work. And that was interesting in two ways. The first way is almost all of the assistant county prosecutors and the prosecutor were in the same private law firm. And so we knew each other very well from being in the law firm together. So we got the criminal prosecutorial practice, and we also were able to hold ourselves out as private attorneys too, as long as there was no conflict with that. We couldn't represent someone who was suing the county or anything like that. But it was the best of both worlds. It really was the best of both worlds. And I look back on it now, I didn't think of it then, but look back on it now, it's probably the best possible way to get experience very quickly. Within 4 years, I was trying murder cases and everything else, and plus had my own private practice on the side. And it was I can't say it was very lucrative. I can't say that, but I will say that I got a lot of experience that helped me out after that. So, yeah.
Speaking of murder cases, there were some pretty notorious murders in the county in the 70s. What were some that you
Well, yeah, we had the .22 caliber killer during that period of time. I was assigned to assist Steve Schaller, who was prosecuting one of those, and Neil Laughlin. I was not part of the courtroom part of it. I was assigned to put together the evidence and make sure it was all in order and so forth. We had a couple other murders. I know I tried one, and the name escapes me now, and it was kind of notorious. We had, let's see, the .22 caliber killers. We had, I can't remember now all of the ones we had.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I know there was one that sticks out in my mind. In Jersey, there was a woman working at a sort of a dairy aisle place. And
no, you're absolutely correct. And that defendant's name?
George Burton?
George Burton. That's right. I actually was a second chair on that in that murder case. The defendant, Mr. Burton, had been a problem in the county for years. He was well known to law enforcement on various levels. He cold-bloodedly walked into that Dairy Queen and shot that lady, and it was a terrible murder. He was prosecuted and found guilty. I don't recall now whether he was given the death penalty or not.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Right. But he and his brother both were well-known people in the Jersey area. Yeah.
Interesting. A friend of mine has a lot of interest in the old jail building.
Oh,
yes.
yes.
And he's been interviewing people associated with that building in particular. And I helped him talk to a guy who was a guard who helped guard the Lewingtons, or one of them.
Yeah.
And he also remarked about the Burtons, about how what a name that, so to speak, they made for themselves.
Yeah, it was a notorious name in Licking County, no doubt about it.
Interesting.
Right.
Are there any other particular cases of that kind or otherwise that stand out?
Yeah, it's funny, as I'm driving over here this morning, I'm trying to think about the cases I worked on when I was with the county prosecutor's office, and most of the time the names escape me, but I still remember how serious those cases were. Even today, I remember how serious they were to the victims of the cases. And you couldn't help, as an assistant county prosecutor, to really get wrapped up into their lives. You became a part of their family as you're trying to prosecute the case on behalf of the county and the state. So, no, I can't tell you remember the names as much as just the people who were involved. Yeah,
Sure,
yeah.
that's fine. Yeah. Then you eventually moved into the position of municipal court judge, is that right?
That's correct. The best way to explain it was, because I majored in political science, I still had a bit of a hobby helping candidates out here in Licking County. I was chairperson for Judge John Sparr's elections. I was chairperson for Gary Billy, who ran for sheriff, who was completely unknown in Licking County at that time. I was chairperson for Neil Laughlin when he was running for county prosecutor a couple times. So I was always involved in politics. John Sparr was the judge in the municipal court at the time, and he was running for a position that was available in the common pleas court, and I was his chairperson for that. And he was successful in that election. And so that left a vacancy in the municipal court. And after it was all over with, John said, and by this point in time, I was out of the county prosecutor's office. I was just handling cases in private practice with the firm of, at that point in time, it was called Schaller, Frost, Hostetter, and Campbell. And he said, you ought to think about taking that position that I'm leaving. And I had thought about it, but I thought, I don't know. Back then, the pay wasn't that good. My practice was thriving. I was, an attorney from Licking County. I knew everyone through my background, and so I had a nice practice and was very happy in it. But I had some people really push me into it, and as I said, I was kind of a political animal at that time. So I put my name into the Republican Party, asking that they consider me to submit my name to the governor for appointment, because at that point in time, John Sparr had left that job. It was in the middle of a term, and so someone was going to need to be appointed, and then once they were appointed, they'd have to run for election. So my name was submitted. I was fortunate enough to have my name submitted to the governor. Back then it was Governor Rhodes, Jim Rhodes, and I had an interview with him over in Columbus, and he was a character. And I was fortunate enough to have him select me as the appointed judge to the Licking County Municipal Court. At that point in time, and still, there are two municipal court judges. Judge Taylor was on the municipal court at that time, and I was appointed as the other judge. I had to run immediately. That year, once you're appointed, you have to run for the unexpired term. And Herb Kaler ran against me, and we were good friends. It's interesting now, people who run against each other in judicial races, apparently there's a lot of rancor. With me and Herb, it was, we were great friends, and we remained great friends. I was fortunate enough to win that election, and that was for, I think, a 2-year term that was still left on that. And then I had to run again, but I had no opposition. About the same time, Judge Taylor was going off the bench, and Judge Steiner took his place. And so Judge Russ Steiner and I were on the municipal bench for several years together, and it was a good relationship. We got along really well together on the municipal bench.
Yeah. You and Judge Steiner.
Judge Steiner, right.
And with the municipal court, does that tend to be more misdemeanors?
Yes, yeah, let me explain. Back, we had, basically, you could look at it as three divisions. One was misdemeanor criminal matters, which are all traffic, plus shoplifting back then, under $300. I think it's up to $500 now. Assaults, disorderly conducts, those types of criminal matters, all misdemeanors, in which you could receive anywhere from 0 days in jail up to 6 months in jail, but no more than that for a misdemeanor. And so it's a volume court, a lot of traffic cases, a lot of terrible cases, and so it's just run all the time, go, and it's never changed. It's still that way. Plus, then we had our civil side of it. If someone wanted to sue someone civilly for, I believe back then it was $10,000 or less, that would be brought, the jurisdiction was in the municipal court. So we would get a lot of collection cases, a lot of those types of cases. Also, what's referred to as forcible entry and detainer actions, but you would know them as landlord-tenant cases. They're the exclusive jurisdictions in the municipal court. And so we had that criminal jurisdiction, the civil jurisdiction, and then we had what was called small claims court, where people represented themselves, and either a judge would handle their case or a magistrate appointed by us would handle their cases. And it was a way in which people could represent themselves and not go to the expense of hiring an attorney when the case wasn't worth that to hire an attorney. And that worked out very well. So that's basically what goes on in municipal court. It's a very volume court. You try cases all the time, you're hearing cases all the time, and it's a lot of time consuming court. It really is. So.
And that differed from the county court as far as the volume?
Well, yes. The difference between municipal court and common pleas court is night and day. We would try cases in the municipal court, a jury trial a day. Pick a jury, try the case, get a verdict. Next day, have another case, pick a jury, get a verdict. In common pleas court, which I eventually ended up in, you'd have 3 or 4 or 5 day trials, and the caseload's not as much. So I was on that municipal bench for 7 years. And Neil Laughlin, who had been the county prosecutor, had gone to the common pleas bench and was the common pleas judge while I was on the municipal bench. Well, then he retired from the common pleas bench, and so that left an opening, and I decided to run for that position. At the same time, Judge Steiner, who we had become very good friends, said, well, he wanted to run too, but he wasn't going to run against me. There had been created by the legislature in that same period of time, the Domestic Relations Division of the Common Pleas Court, and Judge Steiner said he was going to run for that position, which would be the very first domestic relations judge in Licking County, because we hadn't had that division beforehand. Generally, just the 2 common pleas judges were handling all the domestic court cases. Okay. Judge Steiner ran for that, I ran for common pleas court. We were both successful. And actually, I can't say we were both successful. I didn't have any opposition, so that wasn't too tough. I took the judgeship in the common pleas court, and Judge John Spar, who had been on the municipal bench and I had helped out for all those years in his campaigns, was still on the common pleas bench. So it was a great fit. I mean, we had just a very special relationship between the two of us. And I still look back on those days as probably some of the best days I've ever had as a judge, because if I got behind on my caseload, John would take some of my cases and handle those. If he was getting behind because he's in trial too much, I'd take his. And we traded off all the time, and we had a really, really good relationship. And, you know, I'll have to say, other counties don't get along that well with between their judges, but our relationship was pretty special. And I still remember those days as being some of the best days. So I was on the common pleas bench for 10 years. You know, handling all kinds of criminal cases, and those are the felony cases, not the misdemeanor cases. These are when a crime's committed that the penalty is 6 months or more in prison. That's the difference from a misdemeanor, 6 months or less in county jail. 6 months or more in prison is a felony, and those are the felony cases that we handled in common pleas court. Plus, if you remember, I said $10,000 or more was the cutoff for the civil, or less was the cutoff for civil cases. Well, the common pleas court started from there and went up. $10,000 or more on civil cases, if you're asking for that or more, were filed in the common pleas court. So those were the types of cases we were handling, all felonies committed in the county and civil cases of $10,000 or more. It was a volume court. I mean, we tried a lot of cases. One of the reasons we tried a lot of cases, Bob Becker was the county prosecutor at the time. And I believe Bob believed, I know I believed, and John Spar believed, Judge Spar believed, that plea bargaining, this is an interesting point, plea bargaining was getting out of hand. And so we came down with basically a rule that there will be no more plea bargaining in the Licking County Common Pleas Court. And that became a huge issue across the state. People would look at us like, are you guys nuts? You're going to be trying cases all the time. And we did, as a matter of fact. They were correct there. But the system worked well. It worked because Bob Becker would go to these officers, the investigating officers, and say, now we're not going to charge these defendants with 10 different criminal matters. We're going to charge them with just the case we can prove, and we're going to go from there. And we're not going to throw out charges to plea bargain. And we, as the judges, John Spar and I, would say, you know, and we're not going to allow plea bargaining. You either go to trial on what you filed, or you dismiss it, one or the other, from the prosecutor's standpoint. Well, it became a very volume court as far as jury trials are concerned, because we had to try a lot of cases. But the system did work. We kept up on our cases. We didn't get behind on our cases. We were very proud of our docket. In fact, during that period of time, the Ohio Supreme Court required us, every court in the state, to start reporting any backlogs in our docket. And they would define what a backlog case was and so forth. And John and I are very proud of the fact that we didn't have any backlog cases. So we were on that bench for 10 years. And had a great time together, great friendship. And then there was a position available in the federal court. And I guess I have to go back a little bit. When I was on the municipal bench, I was encouraged to run for the 5th District Court of Appeals, which is a 15-county court. Judge Baldwin here from Licking County is on that court now. And I ran for that. I won 13 counties. We tied one county and I lost one county, and my opponent won. Because I lost Stark County, Canton, Ohio. Yeah. And but during that period of time that I was running for that court, you know, I was traveling around 15 different counties, and I got to know a lot of people in politics. I got to know a lot of people in the judiciary in those counties, and we just kept in touch after the election and so forth. Well, this federal judgeship came along, and the senator from Ohio, the senior senator from Ohio at that time was Mike DeWine.
Okay.
Okay, now, at that time, we had two senators, both Republicans, Mike DeWine and George Voinovich. But Mike DeWine was the senior senator. Most people don't remember that, but he went into the Senate before Voinovich did, because Voinovich had been the governor during that period of time. Well, Mike DeWine was the senior senator, and he was also on the Judiciary Committee, who does the initial selections for these federal judgeships. And when I was running for Court of Appeals, Mike DeWine at that point in time, years before, had been running for lieutenant governor. And so we were always seeing each other in the evenings, giving speeches and doing all that in those 15 counties I was running in. And we became pretty good friends, not only with Mike DeWine, but also with his staff. So Mike DeWine then becomes senator. I'm still on the Common Pleas bench, or I end up on the Common Pleas bench, and his staff called me one day and said, "Hey, are you interested in that federal judgeship?" I said, "What federal judgeship?" I didn't even know there was one available. And they explained it to me, and they said, "You know, if you want to apply, this is how you go about applying." I said, "Well, I might be interested." Well, and I talked to who I considered my mentor then, John Spar, Judge Spar, and he says, "You ought to try it." But he says, "I hate it because you might leave, you might get it, and we have a great relationship here."
And I'm sorry to interrupt. Around what year is this?
Okay, this is 83 to 90 to, it's 2000.
Okay.
It's 2000, yeah. Or right around there is when this is all coming about. And so, yeah, well, it's about 2001 or 2002, I guess. Yeah, that's about it. And when the applications were up. Well, so I applied for the position. It's a very, it's a time-consuming type of thing to go through. And you had to collect all of the decisions that you'd written on any constitutional issue from the Common Pleas Court, and I had tons of them. And then Mike DeWine had a process where you interviewed with a committee he had formed, and I interviewed with them, and then he would call you just night and day. He'd call you and ask questions just off the top of his head. In fact, I still remember he says, "I'm sitting here in Congress, or in the Senate," he said, "there's this bill before me, how would you vote on it?" And I said, "Senator DeWine, excuse me if I say this, but I'm not asking to be a senator, I'm asking to be a federal judge." I said, "I don't feel qualified even to answer your question, but," and he did say, "Right answer."
Interesting.
Yeah, he was good at that. Mike DeWine, we got it narrowed down to 3 of us, but we never knew who the other 2 were. They kept that secret. He personally interviewed us again, and then I was fortunate enough to be selected to have my name submitted to the White House, because it's a presidential appointment, but it's in conjunction with the senators of your state. So my name was appointed to the White House, or was submitted to the White House. And this is kind of a funny story. I had never been to Washington, D.C. in my life. My wife, well, this would be my second wife, just so that I'm accurate here. My second wife had worked in D.C. and knew a lot about the Washington environment. So she became my tour guide, basically. We had to go to D.C. and we had to go to the White House for an interview. Well, I'm like the little kid out of the barnyard. I mean, I'm looking around, my eyes are big and everything. And she still remarks about how naive I was in this whole process. But we ended up at the White House for an interview.
If I can break in,
Yeah.
it's refreshing to hear somebody, you can call it naive, but it's kind of nice to hear these days.
Well, I guess it is.
Everybody is jaded at that position.
That's true. That's probably right. Yeah, now that you say that, that's right. Everybody thinks they're a professional now.
Yeah.
I was far from that. So I had, I interviewed with the chief legal counsel for the White House, and a couple staff members there. And I apparently did all right on that interview. And the president, this is George Bush II, the son, submitted my name then to the Senate. And the Senate has to, you go through the Senate Judiciary Committee for a hearing. And I went to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and it was nerve-wracking. It was very nerve-wracking. I will tell you, the way they set this all up, the White House sets it up where they even put you through a mock hearing. And certain staff members in the White House play different senators. And they put you through a complete mock hearing on and what you might expect, and it puts you a little bit at ease. So then they scheduled the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, and I had studied all the hearings maybe for the 2 years before that, and it was kind of obvious. You knew what senators were going to ask what, because I'm sure they had a file in their office, Senate Judiciary selection, and they just pull it and ask the same questions. And you could see that pattern. Well, I knew that there was going to be one senator who I was not going to get along with at all, and I'm not going to name any names.
Darn.
Well, it was Chuck Schumer, as a matter of fact. I knew he and I probably had a lot different philosophies. And I told Senator DeWine that, because he's on the Judiciary Committee. He said, you don't have to worry about Chuck Schumer. And I said, why not? He said, just take it from me, you don't have to worry about it. I said, all right. So we met. Oh, and one of the greatest things is I have all three of my boys there. They were in college and in high school at the time. My mother was there. My mother-in-law was there. It was great to have them all in the gallery area. And we went through the Senate hearing, Judiciary hearing. Well, I didn't realize how this really worked. Some senators would be there for a little while, then they'd have another committee meeting. And they would get up and leave, and others would come in from a different committee meeting, and then they would start asking questions. They weren't all there at the same time, type of thing. Well, Chuck Schumer wasn't there. And I thought, this is interesting. Well, okay, I'm good with that. So as we got closer to the end, I thought, well, okay, I think things are going all right. And just about that point in time, Senator Schumer walked in and sat down, and Mike DeWine had been designated as the chair that day because the chair had gone up, the chairman had gotten up and to go to another meeting and passed the gavel to Mike DeWine. As soon as Chuck Schumer came in and sat down, Mike DeWine grabbed the gavel, hit it on the table and says, okay, I think we've heard enough.
The ins and outs.
Exactly. And I'm going, I swear to God, I'm looking at this and thinking, okay, now I get it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so anyway, then I had to wait for the full Senate to vote on me. And I was fortunate enough to have the entire Senate unanimously vote in my favor. And then the president signs the commission. Well, you can't hold two judgeships at the same time. It is impossible. You're not allowed to. So one day I'm on the Common Pleas bench here in Licking County, and the very next day I'm on the Southern District bench in Columbus, Ohio. And you talk about a rude awakening, you know. Here it is, I'm comfortable where I am. I barely knew where the federal courthouse was, and there I am in the federal courthouse. You know, I've been there now, let's see, from 2003 to, and this is 2014, so 11 years, just a little over 11 years now. And I have great colleagues over there too. I worried more than handling the cases, more than docket control, more than anything else. I worried about, am I going to have the same relationship over there that I had with John Spar over here? And it turned out I had nothing to worry about. They're great people, great colleagues, and I get along well with them.
Good.
Yeah, so.
Looking back in hindsight, do you think there are certain things that especially prepared you for the position you're in now that have been especially useful?
Yes. I can't imagine, although it does happen, I can't imagine being placed on the federal court stage, being a federal court judge, without having any background as being a judge beforehand. I mean, it does happen, and it happens regularly. But I can't imagine it. If I hadn't had the training and experience of 20 years on the common pleas bench and the municipal bench, I would not have been prepared for it. What it prepared me for more than anything was docket control. Remember I said we were always happy about keeping our cases. Well, we have to report to the Congress every 6 months on our cases, and I'm proud to say that I don't have any old cases, but that's because of my training from the common pleas bench and the municipal bench. I know how to handle cases, and there's a technique, and it's kind of interesting. Those judges who don't have a state court judicial background before they came on the federal bench, their caseload's out of control. They can't. There's just a technique. One good thing about me is that with that background, all of the, not all, but many of the judges on the federal court come to me and say, okay, how do you handle these cases? How do you do it? And I tell them how I do it, and they have adopted some of those, and their docket has gotten back into the way it should be. Yeah, so. But I do want to say I'm sitting now with some great judges. I have there are 3 divisions in the federal court, the Southern District of Ohio: the Cincinnati Division, the Dayton Division, and the Columbus Division. And I'm sitting in the Columbus Division with Judge Sargas from Belmont County, Judge Marbley from Franklin County, Judge Watson from Franklin County, and myself. We are the 4 active judges. Then we have Judge Graham and Judge Smith, who are senior status judges. I guess you'd call it semi-retired. Once you reach a certain point, you can either take senior status or retire. And those 2 have elected to be senior status judges. And it's a great camaraderie over there too. We all get along well. We have a good time together, and I enjoy it.
Good.
The cases are difficult. They're a lot different than the common pleas court. And we have some pretty weighty issues to handle over there. But all in all, having good colleagues helps a lot. Just being able to talk to them about your cases and how you feel about things.
So you can bounce ideas off of each other a lot.
We have judges meetings maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks where we'll get together, and every once in a while, I'll bring up, or the other judges will bring up a certain case that they may have. And have you ever, asking if anyone else has had experience with those types of cases and so forth. And it's helpful to know that you're not the only guy in the box at the time. The other good thing about it is, once you become a federal judge, you're allowed to have 2 law clerks. And in state court, we didn't have the funding for law clerks. They assist you in legal research, legal writing, and so forth. And boy, is that a nice thing. I've always said that's the greatest invention in the world, is being able to have 2 law clerks to assist you in research and writing. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Are most of the cases you handle now appeals cases?
No.
Oh.
Let me explain that. There is a kind of a misconception about what happens in the federal court. I'm on the federal district court, which is what's called the trial court level. there is an appellate court above us called the Sixth Circuit, and they handle cases on appeal from 4 different states, Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, and Kentucky. And then the appeal from that Court of Appeals, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, would go to the United States Supreme Court, okay? So we're on the trial court level. Now, we have some appellate responsibility. The appellate responsibility would be, let's say you file for Social Security disability. An administrative law judge will hear your case, and you can appeal that to us on the federal district court. And then if you don't like that, you can appeal to the Sixth Circuit. So we have some limited appellate jurisdiction, but mostly it's just like common pleas court. The complaints are filed. It has to involve 2 separate types of things. And I want to tell you right now, I have been so impressed with the framers of our Constitution on the way they did this. They were smart beyond anything.
I believe so too.
I really do, and there's no better example than in the federal court. First of all is diversity jurisdiction. Let's assume you're from Kentucky or Massachusetts, and you want to sue me in Ohio. Well, the framers of our Constitution said, well, wait a minute. If you have to come from Massachusetts into a state court in Ohio, you're going to worry about getting homered by that state court judge in Ohio. So what we're going to set up is this diversity jurisdiction in federal courts. And it will be independent of the state. And so when you from Massachusetts come in to sue me in Ohio, that can invoke the diversity jurisdiction, and it's filed in federal court, and you won't have to worry about getting homered by a state court judge. So I just think that was the smartest thing they could have ever done. That's one part of our jurisdiction. The other part of our jurisdiction, this is on the civil side, is federal questions of law. You know, if we're talking about discrimination, there's federal laws on discrimination, so that would be filed in federal court. If you're talking about wrongful discharge because of gender, or you name it, there are federal laws against that. That would be filed in federal court. So anything with a federal law nexus is filed in federal court, and then there's diversity cases also. That's our civil side. Then we have the criminal side of the docket, and that is if you commit a crime that is prohibited by federal law, then those are filed there. So what kind of criminal cases do we have? Well, bank robberies. Let's assume somebody robs the Park National Bank here in Newark, Ohio. They are insured federally, federal deposit insurance. So that's a federal nexus, and it can be filed either in state court or federal court, but generally in federal court because of the federal. Kidnapping across state lines, federal. Almost all drug-related cases that we get are conspiracies among several different states or countries. We get a lot of drug conspiracy cases out of Mexico. We get a lot of drug conspiracy cases, believe it or not, out of Africa. And a lot of that kind of stuff. So those are the big types of cases we get. And then my whole life seems, in the criminal area, seems to be drugs and guns. Guns are a big issue involving anytime you use a gun, and if that gun has traveled in interstate commerce, and almost every gun has, it was manufactured in Arizona, and then it's used in a crime in Ohio, well, there's your federal nexus. And so we get a lot of gun-related cases too. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's the type of thing we get.
Okay. Getting back to Licking County,
Right.
your work at the caseload and cutting down on what's the phrase?
Like,
Plea bargaining.
oh yeah, plea bargaining, yes.
Do you think that had any wider repercussions in the county as far as, and it may be very hard to measure this kind of thing, but as far as the crime rate or kind of acting as a deterrence to
You know,
certain crimes? Or-
You're right, that would be hard to say. I will say this, I do know that the median sentences that we imposed out of Licking County were much greater, higher, tougher than those in other counties, because we did away with plea bargaining. Instead of being charged, or being charged with murder, but being permitted to plead to, let's say, a manslaughter case, well, the sentences are night and day. You couldn't do that in Licking County. You had to go to trial on murder or plead to murder. And so those sentences were going to be tougher, a lot tougher. Whether that then, those sentences, and everybody almost everybody in Central Ohio knew, don't get in trouble in Licking County because you're in big trouble. But did that really deter crime? I don't know. The criminal out in the street, is he really listening to what's going on in common pleas court or not? Once they got in the system, they would all say, I shouldn't have done this in Licking County. But whether it had a deterrent effect or not, I can't tell you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't. To be honest with you, I can't tell you.
Okay. Boy, in your conversation, you've covered, I had a long list of
Did you?
questions here, and you covered, I think, all of them, almost. One additional thing I wanted to ask is, do you have any general advice for somebody who is thinking of going into a legal career, maybe just starting out thinking about that?
I get that question asked a lot by law students. I teach at Ohio State Law School some. I teach at Ohio Northern some, my alma mater, and I teach at Capital Law School some. And the questions I get asked are, what advice do you have to a new attorney starting out? And my advice is, start in a county like Licking County. Start in a smaller county, not a large, huge county like Franklin County or Cuyahoga County or Montgomery County or Hamilton County. Don't do that. Start in a small county and you will get experience immediately. And that's why I love Licking County, and that's why I'm glad it's my home. It gave me a good start and a good background in the legal profession very quickly. No, of course, I'm not going to make as much money maybe as some of these high-paid attorneys in the larger counties, but my experience in the first 4 years was greater than many of my law students, or the students I went to school with, all put together. So, yeah, my experience, I've always told young attorneys, start in a small county if you can, because I think you'll find it a better environment to practice in. And if you can, start with a county prosecutor's office in a small county, because you'll immediately get that experience.
Okay.
And I think that's the way to go.
Okay, good. Well, you've given us a wealth of information. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I would say this. If you get an opportunity, talk to John Spar.
I would love to.
John was a great judge here in Licking County. In fact, I think he's going to be honored coming up by the Bar Association and so forth. Talk to John Spar and maybe Judge Steiner.
Okay.
Both of who are retired now, but who are active and still around. And I think you'll get a lot of good information from
Good.
them.
I will follow that up. And are Bob Becker and Neil Laughlin, are they still around?
Neil Laughlin's died.
Okay.
Bob Becker is still around and lives here in Newark. And he'd be a great one.
Okay.
He's had some medical issues involving cancer, but the last time I heard, he's doing well. From my former law partner, Steve Schaller, he talks to him every so often, and he's doing well. I don't know whether his name's in the phone book or not.
Okay.
If it's not, you could probably get a hold of him by calling Ken Oswald, who's the county prosecutor. I think they stay in touch quite a bit.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Oh, that
Yeah.
would be really good.
He would have some great stories.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you, Judge Frost.
Well-
It's been a great pleasure.
You know, this has been fun for me because I enjoy this history type of thing. And
Me too.
I think this is, well, yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
And I think this is just a great idea, so.
Good. Well, thank you.
Okay.
I had a great experience with this.
Well,
I'll sign
good.
off now.